I don't know about you guys, but I never for one moment thought that the Dallas Mavericks were going to win a championship even before the regular season started. If they did win behind the amazing play of Luka Doncic, I would have had to eat my words, but when you take a step back and you look at that team, you know that there is something missing. And there are some tangible things missing and there's some intangible things missing. And I'm going to talk about all of that today. Now, before I get too deep into it, please subscribe. We do this podcast about once a week. During the playoffs, we'll be talking a lot more about everything that's going on, but please support the channel just by subscribing to the channel, hit that notification bell, and comment if you have any thoughts about anything we're talking about today. So, the reason why I knew that the Dallas Mavericks were not going to win a championship was because when I look at this team, you can see that they are missing defense and they are missing two-way players that can contribute on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They also don't have enough movement. A lot of times what I see are the other players outside of Luka kind of standing around the perimeter waiting to bail Luka out if he isn't successful in getting to the basket or getting his shot off. That is not a winning style of basketball, in my personal opinion. If you look at teams that have really great offensive players, teams like the Golden State Warriors or the Memphis Grizzlies or even the Boston Celtics, there's a bit more movement when those teams are successful. And one of the easiest things to prepare for is a team that's playing 75% through one guy. And because a lot of those players that Luka's playing with need to get off more shots in order to get into a shooting rhythm, just waiting for them to bail Luka out is not an offensive strategy that's very challenging to prepare for. And it's been true for a very long time in basketball that if you know that there's one player that's taking more than half the shots, just let that player do their thing and do your best to guard everyone else. And until they got Kyrie Irving, there wasn't really anyone on that team where you felt like, oh gosh, how are we going to stop that guy? And don't get me wrong, Tim Hardaway's son is good. Um, you've got some other good players like Christian Wood. You had Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie before, and those are all solid players, but they are not these crazy defensive assignments for any team that has some halfway decent above average defensive players on their team. So letting Luka get his 40, 50 points and shutting everyone else down is a fantastic strategy for beating the Dallas Mavericks. And a lot of teams have been pretty successful beating them, especially when the games are close. And the addition of Kyrie did not get me excited, largely because Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are too similar in terms of what they bring to the table, but more importantly, they're too similar in terms of what they're lacking. If it were me and I was involved with this team, I would suggest that every single person that on that team get in the weight room over the summer and really try to develop more physical ability as far as defense, more strength, more power, because they have to present more of a challenge to some of these teams in the West. In the West, as you can see from the result that we're about to see after this last day of basketball, is getting tougher and tougher to survive in all the way through to the end. You have the reigning champion Golden State Warriors barely missing the play-in tournament. That's the likely outcome. It's possible that they might even have to play in the play-in tournament. I don't think anyone was expecting that things would go the way that they have, but both the East and the West are far more competitive. And while offense is extremely important, the teams that are going to be successful are going to have to be able to do both, especially when we're getting this close to the postseason. So that was my initial take as far as the tangible things that I see that are missing. There's some other things that we could talk about, but ultimately for me, defense, a lack of movement on the floor, bailout offense with one guy being your main guy, which is fine. A lot of teams play through one guy, but like I said, that's not the most challenging offensive strategy to prepare for if you're the other team. So let's also talk about the intangible things that I see that are missing. Now, I just want to offer this disclaimer. I do fully understand that Luka Doncic is a young player. I think we look at him and see how great he is, and we also can look at him and kind of forget the fact that he's not even 27 years old. And it takes time for a lot of players, even the greatest players in the world that we worship, to find that thing that helps them to get over the hump and win a chip. And let's also acknowledge that there are players who have never been able to do it, who we celebrate as some of the greatest basketball players in the world. I made an entire video about this very fact. And Luka hopefully won't be one of those guys. Maybe he'll get one in time. But some of the things that I've noticed watching basketball over the years is that you have to have certain intangibles along with the tangible athletic and skill abilities that help you to win. And leadership is extremely important. The coach is going to provide leadership, but more often than not, players are looking for the most talented guy to be the leader, especially when they're asked to defer to that person a lot. Now, in some cases, you might have a second guy who's your point guard, who's running things, who might not be the most talented or skilled player, but because he's such a good point guard and he's really running that offense and getting people involved, you defer to that person. I'll give you some examples. Chris Paul, he is a excellent point guard. Like him or not, he's able to run your offense, and he's pretty precise, accurate, and he doesn't make a lot of unforced errors when he's playing and managing the ball. But Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are more talented as far as skill level and athleticism and their ability to score. But when Chris Paul's out on the floor, everyone will defer to him because they trust that he is going to make the right decisions, and he has quite the reputation for being one of the smartest basketball players in the game. Now, if you juxtapose that model to Luka, there are some differences. Luka is arguably the most talented basketball player on that team. We can have some discussions about whether or not Kyrie or Luka are more talented. That I don't think is relevant. But the point I'm trying to make is that I am not seeing that that team is fully committed to deferring to Luka as their leader, because a lot of his behavior and body language doesn't convey leadership, doesn't say, hey, listen to me, I got you. I don't see that his teammates fully trust him. And I'm going to say something kind of radical. It feels like when Luka's not on the floor and when Kyrie is leading the offense, they have more movement. Kyrie is better at getting these guys involved. He's better at tapping into the abilities and skills that these gentlemen bring to the table besides just shooting bailout corner threes. And that gives them more confidence, and they seem more excited to play with him when Luka's not on the floor. So that is something I observed. I could be wrong. I'm sure that there are many examples of this team working well together as a unit, but there are also a lot of examples of them not doing so well. Hence, they're not even going to make it to the postseason this year, which is a huge disappointment and definitely a lot different picture than what we were seeing before Kyrie came onto this team. The last thing I wanted to address in this podcast is Kyrie and, everyone pointing out that this team was doing pretty well before Kyrie got there, but now they aren't even going to the postseason. I don't think that's Kyrie's fault. They gave up a lot of their defense, their grit, their two-way players in that trade, hoping that Kyrie was going to be this cure-all and they were going to have these two offensive juggernauts. But the way they used Kyrie sometimes when Luka was on the floor just doesn't work. They needed to go out and get a player that gives them something different than what Kyrie offers them. I personally would have taken my lumps, did what I could do in the postseason with the squad that they had previously, because I think they would have been better off having more balance in their roster. And then did everything I could in the postseason to get Jalen Brunson to sign. They would have had to offer him a huge bag, but they need, I feel like they need forwards, they need centers, they need two-way, bigger guards. And they also need Luka to make a sacrifice so that he is not only just being this guy who can pass really well, who can shoot really well, who can really dog you on offense, but also is really taking a step back and looking at the talents of those guys around him and doing everything he can to maximize that. Because when you can get greater value out of your teammates, especially teammates who are used as role players, and I'm not saying you need to get Hardaway to become Kobe Bryant or something like that, or get Christian Wood to all of a sudden wake up one day and be Joel Embiid. It's not gonna happen. I'm just keeping it real. No disrespect, but some of these other players who I just mentioned were just born with a level of physicality and athleticism that is an outlier. Or they have height that's an outlier, whatever. But my point is that I don't think they're getting the best out of everyone on that team. And that's not all Luka. That's on Jason Kidd. That's on Mark Cuban. That's on a lot of other people besides Luka. But when Luka's on the floor being their guard, he's got to be that guy who gets the best out of his teammates because only they are out there, so I don't know. But those are my thoughts. I really appreciate everybody who supports my channel. Thank you so much for listening to me talk my stuff. I love basketball. I hope you guys are enjoying everything as the regular season wraps up. I'm going to try to be more consistent on this channel as we get into the postseason. I have a lot of stuff coming your way, so don't forget, like I said, to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And as always, comment whether you agree with me or not. I'm out.